يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. In fact, this topic is very important topic for me actually. Something before Dr. Marsad is going to speak about that. I came to America. I came to America 1988. I became in America. Then I was in the army. When I came to America, I was in the army to get my master's degree and PhD in geology at that time. And then also I became an imam. I was against to have voting, become an American citizen. I told the people when I was an imam, I'm talking, listen carefully. I mean, like 35 years ago, when I met Dr. Marsad actually before he got the PhD and his wife before, and then I was against for voting, against anything for the government. And honestly, I was completely wrong. Some people, Muslims actually, shuyukh and people, say, no, haram to vote. Haram to vote. But the key, please give me attention, especially if you are new Muslims here also, halal and haram, anything related to the deen, related, قال Allah and قال Rasulullah. Allah says so and so, and Muhammad says so, that halal and haram. But the American law is not Muslim country anyway. And also, I found out, especially I got arrested actually because after September 11, they accused me many things when I was sick. Actually, I was sick for a long time. They accused me. I was wrong. Why? In fact, one vote is make difference in the election. And plus, my vote, I can make a change also. The Muslim also can change. A lot of things change right now, gays and lesbian and all kinds of names. And if we're not fighting that by the law, it's not related to our deen. Deen, halal, haram, we understand that. We know what the Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba and the Salaf. Okay? But the voting is not related to the deen at all. Some shuyukh against that, because I was one of them. But I was wrong. Then I met Brother Marsad, actually, his daughter got married in his house. And then we spoke about the election and this and that. And I invited, I said, can you come to our community here, speak about this topic? Because me, myself, as Ibrahim, I want to learn. I want to know my right. And actually, the topic here, this is your country as a Muslim. This is my country. I'm an American citizen. This is my country, my land. Of course, all of us, even our resident refugees, the true American, they call it red Indian, but actually the true American, in fact. So everybody in this country, white and black and this and that, they are refugees. But in the same time, it's our country, we have to defend our country with the law. Alhamdulillah, Dr. Marsad spoke about many times actually, but this time I encourage him, please come and speak to our country. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Marsad. Dr. Marsad, by the way, Dr. Marsad is from Bosnia. He came after the war in Bosnia because a lot of massacres in Bosnia. He spoke about it last time, also more and more. And I wish actually many books, actually, you have the books also with you?
I have a few.
That's very important. We have a sign actually. If you want to buy the books also, it's very important to buy the books for Dr. Marsad. And Sunnahfollowers, by the way, all over the world, not only in Malta Beach, all over the world, inshallah. So sisters and brothers, if you need anything about the book, actually, Dr. Marsad here, you can publish this book, we can send it to you, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Well, thank you, all of you, for essentially choosing to spend some time with this conversation. I imagine this to be a conversation where maybe you can essentially engage and ask questions that you are essentially thinking about, and they're pertaining to something that you're interested in. My name is Mirsad Kirshtorets, and I do have a PhD in political science. And within political science, my area of study, comparative politics. So that means I study different systems and different regions and countries around the world, and try to understand how they're saying different or whatever. So it is true. That's what I do for a living. I actually do teach that, and I write books. I wrote one that I would love everybody to download. You can actually read it for free. So, I'm not making any advertisement, but the book is called First Nationalism, Then Identity. It deals with nationalism and identity. And I think for Muslims it's very important to understand this topic more deeply, so that we know what, when we talk about nationalism, what are we talking about? That's very useful. And so, being that I do this for a living, the only community I don't talk to about politics is Muslim community. And that's partly because of what Sheikh said. It's a kind of controversial topic. And I feel bad about it, because what I learned from Islam, that we all have to pay zakah on the wealth and knowledge that we have. So if this is something I know, I should probably also talk to the Muslim community and try to somehow clarify things and help Muslims better understand politics, so that they can, take a stand vis-a-vis politics, maybe, choose their own orientations regarding the politics based on some sort of real information, or based on some sort of real knowledge, rather than assumptions, hearsay, or things like that. And so that's why I agree to come and speak about this. And this is essentially almost the first time, the second time, actually. One time I spoke to the Sheikh Uthman Khan, from whom I'm lately learning a lot. He's also, like my Sheikh Ibrahim, encouraging me to actually go into this and talk about it. He also even invites me to write something about it, which is sometimes, for me, I'm a little bit apprehensive, but inshallah, we'll see. He's a very kind teacher, so he may essentially help me start doing that. And so that means what? I have to tell you also in the beginning two things. I am a student, when it comes to Islam, I'm a student primarily of three, maybe four people, but three people that you may know, I may mention. First is Sheikh Ibrahim. From him, I actually learned about Islam, and I learned how to live as Muslims. It's important, right? Also, I'm a student of Sheikh Walid Bassiouni. Dr. Walid Bassiouni is also a very important person for me, for my kind of understanding of Islam. I like to praise him always, because he is a true, amazing source of knowledge. And lately, that Sheikh Uthman Khan from Canada, who also kind of now lets me and dive a little bit deeper into some areas which I have not done before. So that's where I come from Islamically. When it comes to, I introduce myself when it comes to academics, right? So I'm a political scientist and what I'm studying. And so, we, in a preparation, we were thinking of what is the good title. And in the end, we decided, based on Nora's suggestion, that the title should be, This is Your Country. And essentially, we can talk about, Muslims in America, or American Muslims, and a topic of political participation, which is not only voting, but more basically engagement or involvement in politics in the United States. And it is a controversial topic. As Sheikh said, a lot of people speak about it, but I am sometimes wondering whether they fully understand what they're talking about, and they may be just giving simple explanations to sometimes complex questions. Now, to begin with, we can say, that this is important. Why? Because it deals with life. And so if we are to live here, and we are obviously living here in the United States, and those of you who are watching over there those platforms, you live wherever you live, right? Then we are essentially participating in some sort of collective life of society. So it is important for us to understand, how should we approach that, both as Muslims and as individuals. As the Sheikh said, there are some clear rules which pertains to specific issues regarding religion, but there are also some aspects of life which are basically open for us to try to contribute and become useful and to better the societies wherever we live. And so that's why it's important to understand how that goes. Now, so that's what we're going to talk about. But also I felt in the beginning, I should also say what we are not going to talk about. So it's very important so that we clear that. First of all, I will not be talking about who to vote for. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to talk about what party to support or what political party not to support. Again, that's not what I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about, what type of government should we have or not have. That's also not something I will talk about. We already have one, and this is what we have. And I will not talk about specific policy in terms of good policy, bad policy, right? That's not what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how it is for us, American Muslims or Muslims in America, however you want to say it, although there are some subtle differences between those two terms. So things that pertains to us. So I will rather talk about how to vote for yourself. That's what I like to talk about, how to vote for yourself, not who to vote for, but to vote for yourself, how to support yourself politically, and at least how not to harm yourself politically and how not to harm those that you love and care about. And perhaps along the way, how to influence government to do good, because Muslims' objective is to do good, right? So how can we do that and essentially impact the society in which we live, and so that way we do not feel bad about it. So first of all, when it comes to politics, let's establish certain things, right? We are, as a Muslims, we are people who believe in order. We believe in order, in structure, right? It is, in fact, I was talking to my brother just before the lecture, and we said that's sometimes difficult for those who are new Muslims to essentially adopt to all this structure and order that Islam gives. But we do believe in order. And when it comes to the order, that means usually when the systems are larger, that means a government. Even in the masjid, which is basically a basic unit, Jama'ah, right? There is an order, and there is a structure, there is somebody who's in charge, and somebody who essentially is, who is having a different roles in that structure, right? And so what is a government? We can say, especially in America, government is essentially the institutions which makes public policy decisions for society. So those institutions that make decisions that affect all of us is what we refer to as government. When we talk about society, it is also inevitable that we mention state, right? And so the purpose of government is to govern a state composed of the people and other resources, composed of the people and other resources. And so the states are therefore those structures that the government comes to somehow direct one way or the other. States are organizations that essentially maintain society. Oftentimes, states have different tools, but unlike any other structure, states have a tool of violence, where they can often utilize violence to essentially maintain the society. And nowadays, states have that so-called exclusive coercive right. So they are the only one who have a right to use violence to achieve some sort of state objectives. Now, we mentioned government, we mentioned state. So it is inevitable to ask ourselves, what's the Muslim position when it comes to state? Can we separate Muslims from state? I don't want to say Islam from state, but that will be even bigger question. Can we separate? And there are lots of, how you say, scholarly differences or differences when it comes to jurisprudence. In a summary, I will say it's impossible. It is impossible to separate Muslims and state, right? From the very inception of Islam, as you all have learned, even when it comes to measuring time, we have Hijri year. Essentially, Hijri year suggests a date in time when we essentially started with building up a state as an organized society where Muslims can live in accordance to their way of life. So Muslim and state cannot be separated, absolutely. And now that state that Muslims have built, original state, is a model for us in perpetuity. We always look back into that all those, how you say, Muslims, Prophet Muhammad and Sahaba have established. And so what did they do? And this is where I will borrow from Sheikh Walid Basuni, who spoke about that transformation from Yathrib to Taiba. He calls it Yathrib to Taiba. And he noted in his presentation, which I invite you to see, he noted how, even the term suggests something. What means Yathrib? It means something not nice, a place of vices, a place of not good things. And when Prophet Muhammad came into that city, he changed the name of that city into Taiba, which is essentially a place of goodness, place where good will be added. So he basically said to people that he came to, look, I came to your city and we're going to build a good place. We're not going to harm you. We're not going to cause any problems, or we're not going to kind of spread mischief, or we're not going to introduce new vices. No, we came to do good. And so the term Taiba essentially talks about, essentially place of good. So that means that's our orientation. Our orientation is to do good and to serve the humanity so that humanity can achieve its potentials in, various ways. One of the ways to reach Jannah, but also in this life to do good things to others. Now, also name of Medina, also the name that city had transformed to is the name, the city of Medina, which Sheikh Walid explained very well, that means city of, with a nice meaning, but city of rules, city where people are welcome, but there will be rules. There will be essentially organized society where everybody will be judged according to those rules which are universal and applicable to everyone without any reference and relevance to your social status or anything. But essentially, rules are there to improve, to make the society good. And so essentially, both of these suggest to us that we are people who are looking for this organized society that is to do good. And so the place where we come to live, whether this is America, Uzbekistan, or any other place, is the place where we contribute to make it better. And so that's very important to establish at the beginning, that our intention and our goal always, everywhere we are, is to improve on the life that people have. So we want to make it better, even in Jamaica, right? We want to make it better, right? We want to help people to improve. Now, the question could be, and that's a controversial question, and I'm risking now, all kinds of, all kinds of tensions, right? I always say to my students, you don't know what means cancel until you meet Muslims. The Muslims are most famous for canceling, right? You say a wrong word, boom, everybody cancels you. So I have to watch my words and very carefully state what I want to say so that I don't get canceled, even though it's perfectly fine if you cancel me. It's okay. The idea is, how should we govern, right? And this is where the controversy comes. A lot of people would like to imagine that ideal case where we have a Islamic government, and then we have Islamic laws and we are all about doing this type of good stuff. But that's essentially ideal. We don't have it, especially not in this country, right? So we have a system which already exists, and we came to live in this system, and we are here. We're not going anywhere. I hope all of you are realizing that. If you didn't realize it until now, we are here to stay, essentially. We're not going anywhere. So now the goal, therefore, is to make this system better, improve it to the point that we can, as people, as members of this system. How do we essentially improve the system? Now, why is that controversial? Because again, I said that people will say, oh, well, we should not be participating in this system because we are legitimizing it. We should not be participating in this system because this is not our system. But that's kind of, again, an ideal argument. This system exists, we live in this system, and we are not choosing between this system and Islamic system, right? If there is Islamic system and then we're choosing this one over that one, then perhaps maybe there will be a discussion. But this is not a matter of choice. This system already exists. Therefore, we're only choosing, should we willingly participate or should we participate by not participating? Because there's no option not to really to cause no effect. You participate even by essentially choosing not to participate. And so what I understand as a Muslim is that we are not people who are sitting back. We are people who always raise up to the challenge, and we do things that we can to improve the life wherever we are. And so once it comes to that, we are touching upon the essence of politics. Essence of politics, right? We want to essentially participate, because politics is about that. We're going to define it shortly. We want to participate in a society where we live and try to improve it to the point we can. Now, there is also an implicit question about, like, how should government, govern in a diverse society like in the United States, right? We can ask the people who, various scholars and stuff, do we have an answer to that? How should we govern in a society as diverse as the United States? I have to tell you that I don't think we have a clear-cut answer to this question, right? So we are yet to develop clear position on that question. Why? Because in part, very early in Islam, we basically stopped developing these type of questions. And so we are now finding ourselves in a situation we have to figure out how to do it, how to improve it. And so that means, again, that opens up the space for us to actually, try to do the best we can with that good intention that we may have. And so now, okay, we said when it comes to all these things that we mentioned, organized society, countries, governments, right? We want to be involved in how these organized societies function, what resolutions they come up with, what laws they come up with, because the laws essentially regulate life. The laws essentially direct us to do this or that or the other thing, right? This is where politics becomes part of the conversation, right? So it's good, maybe useful for us to define what is politics essentially. The best definition that I have heard, and I very much agree with, is politics is essentially a process which decides who gets what, when, and how. Who gets what, when, and how. And so how can anybody say, well, I don't want to be involved in politics? I mean, you're involved in politics from the inception. If you have a brother or sister, what is the constant discussion about? Who gets what, when, and how? If you're married, what is the constant discussion? Who gets what, when, and how, right? If you're working in a company, what's the constant discussion? Who gets what, when, and how, right? Everywhere you go, you're facing this question. So that means you are involved in politics all the time. Now, for us in this setting, we are now talking about, should we be involved in politics on that higher level, on the level of society in which we live? Of course we should. Should we be involved on the state level, on the local level, on the national level? Yes. Why? Because we are contributing to this society. Muslims are overwhelmingly most contributing members of this society. We are much less likely to be involved in all those things that are anti-systemic. We are much less likely to be involved in crime, in drugs, in alcoholism, in all other type of vices, and we are much more likely to work. Why? Because Prophet encourages us to work. I have learned from our Sheikh, and we can mention just one hadith, but there are many. Our Prophet encouraged person who came to beg. He says, let me teach you, and he taught him how he can go to the desert and collect goods and bring and sell it in Medina rather than essentially ask rather than beg. And there are other stories. So in other words, even religiously, we're encouraged to contribute. So we are contributing to this society. I mean, I hope all of you know that, whether you want, you don't, you're getting certain amount of your paycheck deducted, and taxes are being basically, directed for the so-called common collective good when the government uses to do these different things. They use it to build highways, to build hospitals, to build schools, to build whatever else is for public use. So now, should we not be part of it? I mean, I can make these things even more banal, right? What if, I was talking to Sheikh today, what if they want to build a garbage disposal factory right next to the masjid? You have a masjid in a school, and they want to build a garbage disposal factory next to the masjid. How would you respond to that? Would you like that? We were just talking how the nice smell is for Muslims considered to be a charity. Now imagine a garbage disposal factory, right next to the masjid. You come, and that will probably not be pleasant. And who decides where this place will be, where they're going to do that, garbage, disposal and recycling, where they're going to do it. It's essentially a political question. And I'm telling you this is not even a made-up story. We have a school down there, an Islamic school in Sunrise, Florida, and they actually wanted to build a garbage disposal place right next to it. So we had to go to the city council meeting and basically try to appeal and tell them, hey, don't do that. Why? Because we live here, we pay taxes, this is our school. We don't want to have that type of, business right next to the school. We understand we have to have it, but do you think it's appropriate to have it next to the school? So finally, they were able to convince those council members, and they didn't build it. But how would that be called? How would that process of going to the council meeting and arguing and asking, or rather demanding, however you want to call it, how would that be called? It is politics, right? So as my daughter says, your water bill is a matter of politics. What are you being charged in your water bill is very much decided by those political structures, right? And so now all of those people who say we should not be involved in that, I mean, that's essentially a utopian dream, like you were involved in it already. So now it's only a matter of should you be consciously doing it, or should you just sit back and let others do on your behalf, and then you can pretend that you're not involved. Now, so that's what politics is. So now, what is a political participation? Political participation is every or all ways through which we influence these decisions. And so I know that most people, when we talk about it, most people think of voting. They think, okay, should we vote or should we not vote? Voting is the last kind of down the list of things that you can do to affect the policy making. Voting perhaps is the last one in that line. You can affect policy making in many different ways. You can affect policy making by attending these meetings we were just talking. You can affect policy making by donating money. You can affect policy making by talking about issues that we care about. So let's say we care about issue. I was asking Sheikh today about climate change and all these things, the disruption of weather, which will cause a big facade on this planet. And Sheikh said, of course, absolutely, this climate change is essentially caused by human activity, which essentially kind of made things much worse. So we are affecting it. Should we talk about it or not? If we talk about it, then people understand that this is something we care about, and they may consult us regarding the issue, whether we care or not. So political participation is more than voting. However, voting is important. Why? Because this country has a system which is based on voting. The whole concept of governance here is built upon the idea of consent of the governed. And that consent of the governed, in a way, is essentially in part shown through your political participation, which is most obvious when it comes to voting, right? Now, we don't have an option. The system, like every other system, is built to protect itself and to maintain itself. The system is not built to change itself. The system is built to maintain itself and to protect itself. So, meaning, we are here and we came here for a reason, right? Because we thought that this is a good place for us to live, to raise our families. And so that means, we tentatively agreed that this system is something that we will essentially, join and try to improve on this system as much as we can. So voting is important for that reason. But also, since this is the system that is built upon that idea, we have to understand how those who make those public policy decisions, who are directly involved in politics, becoming so-called politicians, and I wish there's more Muslims who are doing that, right? I wish. That doesn't mean it's not a fatwa. I'm just saying I wish there are more Muslims that are doing that, right? Those people who actually do make policy making, who do make these decisions that affect us, they primarily pay attention to who? To people who vote, right? If your job or your election or your place in the government depends on votes, what would you be caring about? Voters. And if Muslims are not only, there are some who claim that we should not be voting. I was saying, okay, so not only that they have an erroneous opinion about it, but they actually go and publicly talk about the fact that Muslims should not be voting and Muslims don't vote and stuff. So this is a disaster. So not only that you are not, affecting the system in a, constructive way, but you're also causing harm to yourself, because you understand why politicians speak so badly about immigrants? You know why? Because they don't vote. And the politicians know up front that they don't vote. So there is no political cost to talk bad about them. When they speak bad, the Sheikh mentioned about Muslims are this, Muslims are that. You know why they speak about Muslims like that? Because we advertise that we don't vote. Not only that we don't vote, but we advertise that we don't. So what do you think politicians will then say? Oh, well, let's be concerned how we speak about these people, because they may essentially go and vote against us. But they know that we don't vote. So how is that good for us? So the point is, what I would argue is that, political participation is more than just voting. In fact, we can be donating money that sometimes plays bigger role than voting. Donating money so that we show with our purses in America, we say, put your money where your mouth is, that we show what do we care about, what do we support, and what do we not support. So essentially, that will be also a way to political participation. But when it comes to voting, absolutely, it's essential for us to vote. Why? Not because this person or that party or this party will win, but by us voting, you have to understand the politicians actually know whether you vote or you don't. They don't know who do you vote for, but they know whether you vote or you don't. Because, when you go to vote, you have to show your, voting ID and stuff. So you're being essentially checkmarked, okay, this person voted. So they know that you vote or you don't. They don't know who you don't vote for, because that's essentially somewhat secret. But even that, we know, political scientists know, people don't really vote for. If you're registered with this party or that party, we know that you don't vote against your party. You either vote for your party or you don't. So that means if you go to vote, I already know who you voted for. So that means if you don't vote, then I know you're not participating. And then if I know you're not participating, why would I care about it? So the point is, it is very important for us to vote. That way, those who make public policy decisions on our behalf will maybe consult us in the future about policies that they want to make. They will ask us, what do we think about? And then we can have constructive input on what and how should be done. Now, finally, our approach to politics is very sometimes, as we said, problematic over us. It's not problematic over anybody else, it's problematic over us. Why? Because if we don't want to participate in that process which decides who gets what, when, and how, well, lots of people are happy. Why? Because the system imagines there is only so much wealth, and the less people sitting around the table, the more wealth for them. So, of course, they would love if we don't participate, because they will say, okay, so there is more for us, right? But we have to understand, if Islam is a way of life, as we were being taught by the shuyukh, then that process of who gets what, when, and how is certainly part of life, and we should be involved. And so now, we are living in a society which is to produce some sort of amount of so-called public goods, right? Let's say what the government in this country does. Think about it. It's mostly good things. They give us social security, they give us insurance, they help schools, they help hospitals, they provide some sort of order, right? So what they use money for is mostly for good things, right? I don't think many of you will not disagree that what the government does is essentially good. In fact, when we complain about the government is not doing enough of the good things. We would like them to do something rather than this or that or the other things. So how they do that is essentially by taking from these public goods which are collectively produced. And so the question is then, are we contributing to these public goods as Muslims? Indeed, we do. You guys know public good is also children. They're very human beings. They are workers. They're productive members of society. They're public good. So we tend to have a lot of children, right? How many you have? Musa, yeah. Yeah. So that's a public good. These people, these children will one day become, people who are contributing in various ways, people who pay taxes and stuff. And so if we are participating, then we should also participate in making these decisions on who gets what, when, and how these public goods will be spent. And that's essentially the essence of what politics is. Now, do we expect anything from the government? Do we expect anything from the political system in which we live? Do we expect anything or we don't?
Yes.
Okay, and how is that essentially supposed to happen? That things that, huh? Very good, yeah. So we need to essentially, somehow, we need to articulate that, and we need to essentially let those people who make public policy decisions we need to let them know what do we want. And again, this is not something that I will say. We all know the story of Muslims, early Muslims going to Abyssinia, right? And then they were basically summoned to the leader, correct? And then the leader asked them, in essence, he asked them, what do you want, or who you are, introduce yourself. And then they articulated what they want, who they are, and what they want. So same thing, like we need to essentially, if we expect anything, then we need to be able to articulate that. So then the question becomes also important, who is going to articulate that? So who do you think should articulate what do we want?
Our leaders.
Which is I love these ambiguous terms, our leaders. And who are our leaders? So, that's a very political question, right? Who is our leadership, right? Yeah, it's a political question, right? So now the question is, should we be involved in politics? And I mean, constantly we are involved, right? So who should articulate what do we want? Well, it depends, right? Certainly, we hope that somebody who actually knows what we want, somebody who knows what we want, right? So that person or those people could be those who can articulate that thing, what we want. And as you see, that's why I said I wish more Muslims are involved in politics so they can essentially be what we call linkages between us and policy-making process, right? So that we can articulate what we want and that system can respond to what do we want. Because right now, the big part of the problem in the United States, Sheikh told me that you had a recently discussion of Islamophobia, which is real, no doubt about it. I mean, I don't like the term. It's really more like of anti-Muslim ideology or anti-Muslimness, I would call it, rather than Islamophobia. It's real, no doubt about it. And we all feel affected of it. It's a form of racism, absolutely no question whatsoever, right? It is about essentially limiting our access to those public goods. But the part of the problem is also in us, because we don't articulate what we want. And the system is sometimes confused. They see us as a contributing members. But when it comes to us articulating what we want, we are sometimes confused about it. So we have to be much more clear in terms of that. And I always recommend nowadays, especially now we're going into very important elections in the United States next year, that you should invite local politicians to the masjid and have them introduce themselves to the community. Tell them who they are. By law, because you are a so-called non-profit organization, you cannot endorse anyone. You cannot say, okay, vote for this or vote for that. But you can certainly introduce them to the community. You can certainly have them meet the community and say what is their position on whatever they are about to do. That's not bad. Why? Because understand, with that type of engagement, you're not only benefiting yourself, you're not only kind of benefiting the Muslim community in general, but you're also benefiting your children. Those children, Musa, that you're going to have, those 10 children, inshallah, that you're planning to have. Why? Because we spoke about that before, I think, and I'm going to mention it again. Listen, people, understand. Identity oftentimes is very wrongly perceived. You know, remember my book is about identity, right? Identity is a physical category or physical role that people take. And that identity has to have a physical space to exist. Without that physical space, identity cannot be exercised. So that means you can believe that you are, I saw a sign in a big truck that has a big bumper sign on the back of that tractor trailer say, I am a Prius C, like hybrid car, right? Like you can imagine that who you are, whoever you want to be, right? But if you don't have a space to exercise that identity, it's a problem. So how do you create a space? Now, am I saying something unusual? What happened? What did Ibrahim alayhi salam, what did he do when he became a prophet? He changed the place where he lived. He went into a place where he could exercise his identity. What did Prophet Muhammad do? He went from Mecca to Medina. Why? Because he needed a physical space to exercise his identity. And prophet after prophet, after they accepted the revelation, after they got the guidance, they want and they looked for a space to exercise their identity. So alhamdulillah, we came here, our identity can be exercised, but this country is built upon very simple principle, which is individual pursuit of happiness. No one will give it to you. I mean, I don't know who people are watching this, or I don't know how it's, but in this country, no one gives you anything. I have at least 2-3 Americans here too, right? Who gives you stuff? Nobody. It's individual pursuit of happiness, buddy. You go get it. And if you don't want to get it, who I am to tell you? So if we Muslims are imagining that somebody will give it to you, well, there's nobody. I have to kind of, reality check. You're supposed to get it for yourself. And that's normal. In this country, this is normal. This is expected. So basically inviting these people, interacting with them, visiting them, you don't have to, you can go to their office, schedule a meeting and say, okay, we are the Muslim community in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We would like to meet with you. You guys know he has to meet with you because that's his job. And he will be happy to meet with you. He will essentially, probably he or she, they will say, finally, guys, I come to meet you. So tell me what the heck you want, right? We're constantly just complaining. Muslims become the biggest complainers in the world. We just complain, like blah, 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 complaining. He may be telling, okay, so what do you actually want? And obviously you have to want things that are possible, right? You can want, as the Omar radiallahu anhu said, if you plant a corn and you hope for, an apple to grow, that something is wrong with you. So you have to wish something that is essentially possible. And so that way, you're building that space. The prophets and the people previously, right, they had to migrate to a space where they can exercise that identity. Unlike many of you, but I do know these people. I heard most of them come from Uzbekistan. They have a much more freedom to practice Islam here than is in Uzbekistan, correct? Is it? It is, right?
Middle East too.
Of course, Middle East too. I mean, this is unfortunately true. We wish it's not, but it is true, right? And so that means, okay, so there is a kind of place for us to exercise our identity. Now it is about making it a little more, in line to what we want. But that needs to be articulated by us. And then through that political participation, we can make things better. And doing that will help then our children be able to exercise, or rather, exercise that Muslim identity that we want. Unfortunately, there's no other way. There is nobody else who will do that for you, me, or anybody. You and I are the only people who can do that. And essentially, that's also that process of who gets what, when, and how. Who gets a space to exercise his identity and who doesn't? Like, who gets a space to wear hijab in public and who doesn't? You guys hear about friends, right? Woman cannot go and swim in the ocean in that what we call it burkini. Who decides that? The government decides. So you look, we are talking about who has a right to exercise his identity in public, right? What is that being decided through? Politics. And so there are some people who are concerned, who say the way the Muslims in this country behave, they say we can perceive that maybe 10, 20 years from now, we're going to be like France, where people like me will be asked to shave the beard, and the woman will be asked not to appear in public in a certain way. Why? Because we refuse to participate. So I absolutely encourage you to essentially understand where you live, understand the system in which you are, basic principles, and basic principle is, individual pursuit of happiness. In other words, you are to essentially chase and do what you want to make yourself happy, or to organize system the better, to be the way you want. And the second is that could be done through political participation. And political participation, as we said, are all those activities that affect essentially policymakers in choosing what to do and what not to do. Sometimes what not to do is better or more important than what to do. And so that's essentially how I will approach this. And at this point, maybe we can open the floor for some questions or comments or something else. If there are any questions, I guess even for the people who are watching on Facebook, you can guys ask the questions.
Sunnahfollowers, if you have any question regarding this also, you can speak, inshallah. Here also, we are honest. Yeah.
Yes.
If we vote for someone, I was asking if we vote for a particular person and that this person he's not a Muslim, but he listens to Muslims and he made a decision, but it's considered to us, it's haram thing because we voted for him. Would that gain us any bad deeds?
No. That's my understanding. But Sheikh, it's more kind of Islamic question. But my understanding, no. We are being judged based on our intention, right?
Yes.
So yeah. My intention.
The action, with the intention, that Allah will judge us about our intention. Our intention.
So, like in the particular case, we are not supporting him because of the policy, that policy that you mentioned that we don't agree. We're supporting him because of the policy we agree with. And that's why we prefer this one over that one, right? And so, alhamdulillah, we believe in religion where no one takes our sins from us and no one can take our good deeds from us. So, again, I understand the idea, but I understand the real. And the real is, this is the system, these are policymakers, they're being elected by the population in a process which is not so perfect, but it is kind of working, right? And they are making decisions based on essentially these interactions with the community. And I know what you're hinting, and I understand what your questions are, but you understand this community is very active in pursuing and pushing for their goals, their rights, their agendas and stuff, versus what happens to you. And look, I will tell you something that is kind of maybe a little bit iffy, but again, I can be canceled. I really envy Christian community in this country because they're very active when it comes to this type of stuff, politics especially, right? They're very vocal to express what they agree with and what they disagree with. And they're very active to say we support this and we don't support that. And how do you think politicians here would know what do you like and what you don't like? He's supposed to imagine. You don't want to talk to him. You don't want to interact. You don't go vote. You don't participate to it. So how does he make it? While he has different communities which advocate for whatever they want to advocate for, and she responds to what he or she hears it. And so in that sense, I very much commend these Christian communities in this country, which are very active. Let me not mention Jewish communities, right, who are even more active when it comes to pursuing what they like, right?
You have Jewish communities, by the way, in the synagogue. Everyone in synagogue, they vote.
Exactly. Well,
if the rabbi said vote, you vote. No question.
Because they understood very harshly how hard it is to live as an isolated. You know, Jews have lived like that in Europe before the Holocaust. Or not all of them, but many of them. And then, you know, they had to experience what they experienced in part because they were isolating themselves. They were not participating, those who didn't, right? And they were thinking, okay, if we just don't bother these people, they will leave us alone. It's not working like that. So I'm telling you that because we in Bosnia, we have similar experiences. We also scale down our expectations. We agree with everything. We never told anybody what we want. And then what? We ended up in a concentration camps and experienced genocide. So my understanding of your question is, if we are more vocal in terms of what do we want, if we are more active expressing what do we want, if we interact more with the policy makers on all levels, perhaps they may respond to what we want. But right now, we have two big problems when it comes to politics. The problem number one, we still have an immigrant mentality. We live here, but our brains are somewhere else. And so we are kind of almost like a double people. Like, we have to understand we are here. This is because those of you from Morocco, mashallah, brother, when you go to Morocco, they don't treat you anymore as they kind of say, okay, you're here, but they look at you like you're American. Exactly. Even there, right? Yeah. You always back when you go back to Uzbekistan, they look at you like, you're no longer, right? And so it's better for us to understand we are here, right? Put our, efforts and direct ourselves here. So that's the first problem. And second problem is this confusion where people talk about stuff without really knowing. So with all due respect, that's why it's very important, who do you learn from? That's why I mentioned in the beginning who I learned from. I learned from Sheikh Ibrahim, I learned from Sheikh Walid, and I learned from Sheikh Uthman Khan from Canada. And these are the people who actually, the beautiful thing is about them, they know the limits of their knowledge. And when they get to that limit, they say, well, you look for yourself or look further, rather than pass a judgment on things that are really not correct. So I'm sorry I took too long.
Hold on, something very important. When you vote, by the way, I vote myself. It's many options. Of course, the first, number one, Republican, a Democrat, this a president, many people like that. Two people want to be president. And many options. This year, actually, the ballot, one of the ballots will be this year, gays and lesbian and this, what's called LGBT, long name. You don't vote. Don't vote with this, don't vote with that. Something haram, haram, don't vote.
Yes. Show your preference.
Exactly.
Perfectly fine.
Yeah.
No one will hold it against you. Why? Because individual pursuit of happiness. So let us assist the question and then
yes, Frank.
My question was kind of along the lines of, you were talking about political participation, and then I know you said voting is kind of the last step on the process, and we know that in regards to political participation, voting is a right reserved for citizens. But I'm asking for people that are maybe, live in the U.S., still contribute to society positively and all that stuff. They are also able to participate politically.
Get the question?
Say it again.
I was talking about basically all this participation and stuff. Some people might imagine that this is something that's reserved just for citizens, but I wanted to kind of see if you clarify that there are people that are not, that I was saying that voting is a right reserved for citizens. Yet there's many other things that you can do even as a long-term resident. You're still a contributor to society, even if you're not necessarily.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for. That's why I mentioned that.
The question.
Yeah, the sister said that voting is reserved just for citizens. So what, if I may summarize, what about those who are not citizens? Can they participate? Well, that's why I mentioned the political participation is all activities which people do to influence policy making. And even if you're not citizen, you can essentially affect policy making in various ways. Even if you don't have a right to vote for various reasons, some people don't have, you can affect policy making in various ways. You can volunteer your time. You can attend a meeting in the masjid and convey your preferences to your brothers who are citizens so they can talk about it to the policymakers. Policymakers, when they come to the masjid, they're not going to ask you, are you citizen or you're not citizen? They will talk to you and hear from you regardless of who you are, because they understand that you're essentially part of this society, you're paying taxes. So they want to represent you even if you're not citizen. Finally, when it comes to politics in general, right? the representatives of states in Congress are based on the population of states. And they count the population of states every 10 years in the census. And when they count the population, everybody is counted. Citizens, residents, even illegal immigrants are counted for the purpose of representation. That means those representatives are representing you, whether you are citizen or you're not. And therefore, it is up to you to communicate, to express your preferences. I don't want to come talk too much about it, but you can also donate money, which has much greater effect. You know, political scientists will tell you money has a greater role than just the vote. Voting is important, but money plays much bigger role. Let me guys tell you something. If this masjid donates, $10, $15, $20,000 to any candidate, I will assure you that candidate will be once a month here asking you, you guys need anything? Right? Absolutely, right? And so donating money is a very, very, very strong indication of what do you like and what you prefer. So my suggestion is, of course, donate money. If you believe in some goal, like the Sheikh said strongly, why not? Donate money to that candidate, and you will get the thank you notes from him or her, and they will essentially very much respond to your call, to your email, to your message tomorrow when you want something. Let's say you want a traffic light in the front of the masjid when you open the school soon, inshallah, right? You want a traffic light there. Well, that person will be much more, open to respond to that if you have participated, if you have attended the meetings, if you have added, to the campaign or something, right? He would essentially be much more willing to participate. So voting is just one way. It's very fun in this message. There's always something happening. Voting is one way to participate, but not the only way. So I encourage you to participate in any capacity that you can. In other words, if you cannot vote, it's supported in a different way. Thank you. Sorry.
Before that, Frank. Yeah, Frank.
Yes, go ahead.
Do you think that Muslims should seek to form political alliances with Christians and Jewish people, since in theory we have similar values?
Well, Brother Frank, you're already starting controversy. If you're asking me, I think absolutely yes. But this is a question for some, maybe you too.
Yes.
Of course. I mean, historically, we have done that. Prophet Muhammad used to make dua for Christians, right?
Yes.
He made dua for Christians when...
No, not the way you clean his, like 1 month, make qunut, every salah, qunut. For example, last war in Palestine, happened like a few months ago, I make every salah, make qunut and qunut. Every salah, in Farida and Sunnah. And the people complain, I say, what's going on, Sheikh Ibrahim? I said, Rasulullah did that when one of the war, make 1 month, he make a qunut. And as sometime, recently you have in Jenin, a war, every salah we did the same thing, like 2 weeks ago. So yes, the answer is yes.
So yeah, we can make, alliances with the Christians and the Jews on things that
guys,
we agree.
We need one more question because the time is running fast.
So very important.
Rashid. Yeah, Rashid.
I just want to add something there. Like the mistake that the Muslim community do in America is always waiting for the president election, then they vote, not the local vote, like local elections. And this is one of the. We already talked about that, and I addressed it to the board one time. And we need to encourage our community to start voting for the local in the local elections.
Soon, inshallah. You're so much right that it is kind of painful to see. Look, brother, that's going to be explained rationally, empirically. When you vote for president, right? you as an individual, your benefit can be calculated as 1/300 million. When you vote for a local council member, your benefit is 1/10,000 people who live in your community. So in other words, it's much more important to vote in local elections, especially for Muslims. When it comes to Muslims, I would say hugely important to vote in the local elections. And I think for president is, it's a secondary to local elections, because we want to improve the life of real people in the places where we live. And then finally, I wanted to say just something. Oftentimes, as immigrants, we are also burdened by things that we bring with us from home. Yeah. You have to make alliances, as the brother Frank asked, here based on issues and goals here. We have to keep some of these issues, we have to keep them separate from someplace else and make alliances here based on the issues that here affects us this way or that way, based on the preference. So you understand, I'm avoiding to suggest vote this, vote that. I'm just saying vote for yourself and be very rational when it comes to that. Understand the reality and see how to affect it. And absolutely, local elections way more important than the presidential election.
Sunnahfollowers, any question? Sunnahfollowers?
Did I get?
Are you there? Sunnahfollowers are there? Yeah.
Are you saying, Assalamu alaikum, are you saying that Muslims can vote, and are we able to have a party, like they say Republicans, Democrat, and say that you've already, you were a convert and you have been voting before you became Muslim, but you had stopped voting. So can you vote or not?
Well, sister, thank you for the question. Sister says, are you saying that we can vote? Like she said, mentioned an example of a person who became Muslim, who reverted to Islam, and he used to vote, and then when he became a Muslim, he stopped voting. Well, not that I'm saying that. I'm saying it's absolutely essential now that you have become a Muslim, and when you can really help the community in a real sense, because like what brother have asked here, he's a similar situation. He already knows a lot of people, and you can be that bridge that can somehow communicate and transfer our concerns to those policymakers. And absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, not that you can, but you should, and be very much public about it, and indicate that you're doing that because you're Muslim, because this is your sense of social responsibility, where you contribute with the goodness, right? Sitting back and doing nothing, how is that going to help anybody?
Thank you.
In fact, I published a book actually. I was voting, but in Arabic. Soon, inshallah, I'm going to translate it in English with me. And I'm going to add something with Dr. Masad. Okay, we have actually 5 minutes, unfortunately. But I would love actually to have Dr. Masad, inshallah, soon. But us here, unfortunately, the time I told them 45 minutes now, 1 hour and 15 minutes.
As long as I'm not canceled. Did anybody cancel me yet? No,
yeah. Okay. We have a question. No, one more question, and that's it, inshallah. So, the forward or here, yes.
So I wanted to say there's only been 4 Muslims ever in American history inside politics. 3 of them have been women, and all 4 of them have actually been, I won't say what political party they're part of, but I'll say they've been very unfavored by the majority Muslim community. I mean, one of them even accepted homosexuality and stuff as part of like indoctrination and stuff. So they don't really, like, when they get into politics, they tend to lose their identity. So I think it's really important, like, as Muslims.
Not necessarily, but think about it. If you're a politician, like the brother, you're a politician. You do not make these coalitions with Christians and Jews, right? And this is your job. How do you make it?
Yeah.
And the only community that will vote for you are these, because Muslims don't vote.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? Let me kind of turn it the other way. I'm just kind of create controversy, since you're Timur, you're a controversial person. What if you sell ice cream? And all of a sudden Muslims start saying, we don't want to eat ice cream, it's too cold. And that's what my business is. And now all these people who are all of a sudden coming and eating ice cream, what should I do? Close the business? Tell me who did that. No, people just tend to be more, critical of the people who exercise and do this type of jobs in public. But I will argue about those 4 people. One of the people who was involved in politics was Dr. Ismail Farouqi. Yes. He was slaughtered in his house in Virginia by another Muslim. And he was the one who was to establish essentially Islamic Institute, which is essentially to address the questions like that, and he was eliminated.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there were other people who were involved, and but they were not maybe involved by being elected members. They were involved in basically addressing the community. I'm involved.
Yeah.
Hello. I just want to make a point that happened like when Muslims asking the political person that they don't like kind of action happened to them that seems happened in Michigan. They banned the pride flag. So they listened to them and they actually did that. So I agree with you that.
But this is not the only issue. You discuss that. That's not the only issue that Muslims have. Guys, think about it. Should we be not concerned about homelessness? Should we be not concerned about, lack of the healthcare? Should we be not concerned about, climate change and environmental issues? Is this the really only question that we are kind of being heated up by? Like all other injustices, doesn't matter. Just that one. Which flag is flying? I mean, of course, I'm not endorsing it, but sometimes I'm upset. It's the only thing the Muslims talk about. I mean, is there anything else that you guys are? I mean, you're boring. I mean, I can be canceled at this point. it's like, is there anything else that we are concerned with?
I just wanted to make a comment that potentially Muslims or any other people of faith would be able to make more of an impact if they focus or put more focus on local politics as opposed to, like you said, with the presidents who should have moved.
Of course.
Okay, well, look at the time. Okay.
Also, like, I just want to add something. Like when we have a Muslim, Christian, and Jew, and we meet together, like we have this connection, it will be so better, much better to get the right person in the.
Of course, absolutely.
Guys, thank you, Dr. Mirsad, for coming out, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think Jazakallah khairan. We'd love to see you again, inshallah. Brother, about this topic, inshallah, my intention now to send a letter and contacting the congressman, the senator, the representative, to invite us here, to invite them to come to our masjid to know their agenda. We have to understand their agenda. Yes, no, we can believe it or not. When we are active like this, we're going to change the rules in this state, in this city. We'll start with the city, inshallah, together. And the key, we have to work together. Because if we are one hand, one united, we make difference. Okay, dokie?
Something else. Just like